Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, I've got some sad news to open the show. Sad news. Not so much news. Well, a little bit. A little peel behind the onion here. I think Vandy hitting the over on 2.5 regular season wins is going to have to wait until at least mid-October, which is a bummer after Clark Lee's defense resurfaced and couldn't get a stop in the final minute at Georgia State after rallying back down 2 scores with 3 minutes left. I definitely was locked in on the last 2 minutes of that game, like really locked in.
Yeah, this was an underratedly weird slate, right? Because the games that we were kind of hyped about, I mean, a couple of them lived up to it, right? But there were so many off-the-board games. UAB, Arkansas is another great example where it's like, what is going on here? Like, how many games do I need to watch at once?
Well, you all right? You sound like you've been like crying it out like you're a Florida fan right now. You good?
Well, you saw the LSU South Carolina game.
Yes. Okay, fair. Let's say no more.
That's it. I'm good. I'm feeling great. I did so much screaming at my television. That's it.
Gotcha. Okay, understand. A little table pounding a la Nebraska, although Nebraska hasn't had to do any table pounding just yet. The reason I brought up the Vandy thing is because despite the fact that Diego Pavia led a late comeback and then Georgia State's quarterback made like a Dan Marino throw to win that game. Go watch that throw if you are a sicko. Georgia State, unbelievable. But we may or may not have just lost a Diego Pavia interview because of that throw. And that's too bad because he was set to come on this weekend. TBD on if that's going to go. We will have a first-time guest. That is the expectation. Someone who is currently down perhaps even worse than Florida fans. Maybe. Okay. That's a little teaser for the people. But yes, week 3 in the books. We've got a lot to get to. As of this recording, by the way, we're recording this 10:37 a.m. No word yet officially on Billy Napier's future. There is some discourse about the meetings that have been held or not held this morning. Kind of seems like depend on who you talk to and what. So as of this recording, TBD. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get to Florida in just a second here. But Will, let's start with the number 1 team in the country doing the unthinkable and almost losing at Kentucky. I say tongue-in-cheek unthinkable because we kind of thought there was at least a scenario, and you were talking about like, yeah, I mean, last time they were at Kentucky, it's like you just kind of never know. They have often struggled for whatever reason to kind of put their foot on the gas there. Really, 2017 SEC East title game of sorts was like the last time that Georgia or 2018, I guess that was the last time that Georgia like really asserted its dominance in Lexington. But yeah, man, sport never ceases to amaze me. Never. Last week, did Georgia belong on, or did Kentucky belong on the same field as South Carolina? Nope.
And dude, this is the funny thing too, because we talked about it, and like I kind of made that convoluted point about the puke on the shoes game, but that's exactly what this was, right? Like Kentucky showed up unprepared to play against South Carolina. That's all that was. Because if like Georgia basically never really broke it open, like there was not a moment where guys were confused, running around scared. There was some coverage bust. And I think Georgia was just hoping and praying that team would show up for a play or two. And it truly never happened. That's the thing that's so disgusting about this loss for Kentucky is that they showed up ready to play for Georgia, and they didn't give Georgia that easy bucket pass play that would have broken this game open. So, like, yeah, this team does look pretty locked in for Stoops right now, as weird as that sounds.
Yeah, Kentucky goes from being just laughed off the field, essentially, to being one Sean McDonough trouble with the snap call away from potentially winning this game. Which
several blades of grass on the pick six.
Dude, oh gosh, what a play that could have that would have put Kentucky up double digits. All of a sudden, everybody and their mother is watching that game. Atmosphere looked incredible. My guy Perry was there. He was texting me throughout. Kroger Field, underrated. I'll continue to say that, underrated SEC atmosphere. But yeah, it just goes to show you this is such a week-to-week league. It is such a week-to-week sport. We left it open for this to be able to happen, but I think at the same time we're like, well, we can't just. That's what we saw. We can't like legitimately expect Kentucky to come out here and give Georgia a 4-quarter game. But look, I still think that Georgia got after Brock Vandagriff, and Kentucky's offensive line still has problems. Like let's not. It wasn't like a total flip of the switch, a la South Carolina's offense going from that game they played in the swamp to the next week in 22 when they looked like that against Tennessee. Like, it wasn't that night and day, because I mean, Jalen Walker could probably tell you where every freckle on Brock Vandegrift's body was located by the end of that night. That guy was insanely good. But what a game it turned out to be. It turned out to be really, really entertaining. Kentucky shows, exactly like you said, that it hasn't given up. If there was a game in which you would give up, it would be probably Georgia and them imposing their will against, I thought, the Kentucky offense, or at least for decent chunks of the night. Can we actually start with probably the most controversial thing of the night? Not the overturned pick six, but the Stoops. Yeah.
Goodness, man.
This was the most Iowa thing that Stoops has ever done. I think we can all agree. Punting on 4th and 8 in a 1-point game with 3 minutes left when you are at home, crowd is rocking against the number 1 team in the country. That got roasted as it happened. And of course, after the fact, like, Kentucky doesn't get the ball back until there's 9 seconds left. Like, you could see that coming. While I totally agree with the sentiment there, that it's, you have to have context, right? You have to understand you're facing the number 1 team in the country. You're maybe 9 yards away from setting up your all-world kicker to potentially get a lead. Like, dude was dialed in. And so you have to understand that. And if I'm making that decision in that moment, like, I would like to be able to go for it. My controversial take, though, I didn't hate the move as much as everyone else did. I didn't quite.
That's the Big Ten coming out of you, brother.
Here's the thing.
You got to renounce that.
I know.
He's going to qualify for the Brett Bielema Iowa tattoo now.
Okay. Right. Like, I still would have gone for it. I wasn't like woefully, oh my God. I actually saw a path in which it could work out. I guarantee you this is
like Oscar Delp fumbling, for instance. Like, let's say they put it to them and then Oscar Delp fumbles and then Kentucky just kind of goes, huh?
All right. Fair. Hear me out here, Will. Hear me out. It was 4th and 8.
Mm-hmm.
In the second half of the game, Georgia had held Vandegrift to 3 for 11 for 38 yards. It was South Carolina all over again. And on the on the previous play, he had just gotten demolished. And there was like, okay, you could probably just, have an incomplete pass here. You could go for it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Even if he throws a pick, it's like, all right, you're still kind of in the game. You still got to get stops. I get it. But with how well they had him figured out, getting 8 yards for that Kentucky offense was not your typical 8 yards. Okay. Yeah. So that's just like, that's worth remembering. And Stoops at the time is thinking, okay, I've got all my timeouts. I've got the 2-minute warning. My defense has been lights out. I mean, Georgia's sitting there with 13 points. If you pin them deep, you get the ball back. Even if it's a minute, Kentucky could get the ball back already in field goal range if Georgia is just punting from their own goal line, because they just can't really do much of anything. And obviously that didn't happen. Georgia got those multiple first downs that it needed, because it wasn't just one first down. It was multiple first downs that they needed to get. But beautiful play action I love that design from Bobo. I love the execution from Carson Beck and Tom Lovett. The timing of that play action, that really was kind of the dagger, I thought, at the time. No trouble with the snap. Georgia survives a scare from Kentucky. And look, before we get to the Kirby part of this and the Georgia side of it, because obviously that's a clear takeaway, this is going to be a tough pill to swallow for Kentucky fans, because you see what it looked like. Be honest, though. Be honest. Kentucky fans,
look yourself in the mirror. What was going to happen here? I get it.
You know you weren't getting 4th and 8. Y'all know it. You know it. And I know you have to find out, but you can sleep a little bit easier knowing you weren't getting that 4th and 8. Maybe Vandegrift rolls out to his right and picks it up with his legs. I won't necessarily rule that out. Your level of confidence that he was getting 8 yards in that spot is minimal. And it's more convenient to just be like, well, yeah, the punt's the worst decision I've ever seen. Again, it still was not a decision that I was particularly a fan of. But let's not pretend like Kentucky just lost the game as a result of that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I would think of it like this, right? Imagine it's like going for 2. Okay, so you're kind of at this point in the game where you've done enough to put yourself in the position to win, but we pretty much agree that the numbers say okay, if you kick it back to this Georgia offense, they're going to find a way to get a first down.
Probably. Well,
Right.
2 first downs they would have had to get. They would have
Right.
had to get at that point. Yeah.
Well, if you don't trust them, that's the thing. If you don't trust them to get 8 yards, how long do they need to get across the field?
It just depends, because if you're talking about like what the field position could be, yeah, you're right. Then if you get the ball, if Georgia gets 1 first down
Right.
and then you're getting the ball back on the other side of the field, I see your point. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying there. So I don't even really disagree with your point, right? But you got to think, okay, if I don't trust my offense to get 8 yards,
Yeah.
how quickly do I trust my offense to get 40 yards, 50 yards?
You're
right?
just trusting your defense to not let up a single first down, and for them to
Right.
be punting the ball out of worse field, like punting the ball backs against the end zone, and then you get the ball in plus territory anyways.
Yeah, and I hate to be like couch observer guy, but man, I mean that Delp thing is so heartbreaking, and I think that's not being talked about enough. Where again, you see it in 8K, it seems a lot slower than it was in real time, but that ball gets jarred loose, and the one Kentucky guy is talking to the other Kentucky guy while the ball is rumbling around. It's like, guys, you planned for exactly this to happen, did you not? When you kicked the ball back to them, this was the dream scenario. Stoops was going to look like the smartest coach on the face of the earth. Delp fumbles, balls loose. You're in field goal range. Like, you're right there.
I thought they still had more to gain on that. I thought were they in field goal range?
But I'm saying, like, you would have the time, you have the ability. Like, the math completely changes when you recover that ball, because now you have a fresh set of downs. All you have to do is gain like 10 yards, right? Like, because your kicker's electric. So point being, like, I think that let's see. So like, I think that's so heartbreaking in so many reasons, because the way it played out makes your coach look the silliest way possible. But in reality, I see your point about 8 yards. I think that's kind of a coin flip. Like I said, I would view it as a 2-point play. I think at some point you got to make the play. I think at some point you either got to move the ball all the way across the field, or you got to get that one play. To me, it's easier to get the one play than it is to string 4 or 5 together against the Georgia defense, knowing you can't run the ball when you get the ball back. And this is another example of an older school coach, trying a couple of passes in a row when they probably need to be, pushing it forward, because when you're looking at 3rd and 8, it's a little bit different than the 3rd and 4. Right. So I think that in that spot, that's actually when you go conservative. That's when you go a little bit more Mike Bobo. And what's funny is Mike Bobo threw the ball when he got it back at the end of the game too. It's kind of funny. Both of these coaches spent the whole game being conservative, and at the end they like ripped off their shirts and were like Coach O, and they were like, let's go run through a wall. It's like, brother, you should just keep being yourself. Right. And so, yeah, I think it's so disappointing the way it plays out, and everyone's going to roast Stoops. But I had a lot more positive than negative to take away. That's why I said in the pregame, I'm going to wait to say anything about Stoops, because I didn't want to go blast him and then have his team play this hard for him.
Just to clean up that point, Delp fumbles on the Kentucky 42 at that time. So, and then I thought you couldn't advance the football on a fumble. And I was like, I don't know why Arian Smith is able to pick up that ball and it's a first down when he was behind the first down. Like, I thought that was a weird ruling. We're going to have a discussion later about a rule that clearly not everybody knows the rules with LSU.
Fun weekend for officiating, for sure. Yeah.
It really was. But then we get the, Georgia picks up the first down, in that spot. And then it's pretty much curtains from that point on. Kentucky gets the ball back with 9 seconds left. But yeah, like just something to keep in mind there is like we're talking about a scenario that, yeah, I mean, you just only get so many of these opportunities. Like, it just does not happen very often. So it's something that obviously, like, we're going to dissect until the end of the earth. On the Georgia side, Kirby talked afterwards about how people don't respect what it means to play on the road in the SEC. And I don't think he was just talking about national pundits. I know Joel Klatt has had his fair share of jokes about that, but I think he was actually talking about his own team. I really do. And he's basically saying each of my teams have had to learn this, even as we've been winning titles. But if there's anybody that has a right to actually come out and say that, it's Kirby or Saban, because when you've won 28 consecutive regular season conference games, you can speak on the strength of the conference, and not when you're Matt Rule and you're coming off of a 5-7 season and you've never beat a top 10 team in your FBS coaching career. But that's a different point. Kirby also pointed out how this felt like 2022 at Mizzou and then the Auburn game last year. And I think he's right. I really do. Like, slow start, fourth quarter comeback. Don't really worry about the spread if you're Georgia by day's end or whatever. Just find a way, because even the best teams experience that. And I'm not trying to let Georgia off the hook. If there are big picture concerns, the Tate Ratledge injury, significant. That's the thing I'd be most concerned about. That's Georgia's best offensive lineman. He was carted off the field. Not only did he have a left knee injury, but also a left ankle injury. I mean, he's in boot and crutches, which is not ideal.
And a brace. Yeah, nothing makes me sadder than a big guy in a cast. You know?
Not ideal. Not ideal. That's a more troubling sight than, is Carson Beck going to figure it out? Like, I wouldn't really worry about that as much. The Michael Williams injury they're still dealing with. So between Stackhouse, Williams, and Ratledge all being out in mid-September, that doesn't really bode well for Georgia being this impose its will force in the trenches, which I don't think it was in this game. And that's where Georgia, week in, week out, we just always assume in the 9 years of the Kirby Smart era, that's where they're going to have an advantage. Or at the very least, if they're up against a team like Alabama, it's going to be not something where they're going to be at a disadvantage. And I'm not saying that it becomes a disadvantage because of the aforementioned guys like Jalen Walker, but still, that's the type of stuff that can prevent you from looking like a juggernaut week in, week out. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe I'm a sicko and I can say this because I'm not a Georgia fan who's sitting there, living and dying with every play. I do like seeing Carson Beck in situations like this sometimes because we kind of just accept that when Stetson was in these situations, he would figure this out. But it's still a question that Carson Beck is working to answer is who are you in these clutch moments? Who are you when you're trying to win a national championship? Because I think he's had some performances where he's just been awesome and he hasn't necessarily had to make these big time throws down the stretch. Or if he's had to make these big time throws, he's had a safety valve like Brock Bowers. This was the first time where I truly thought, as crazy as it sounds, Georgia misses Brock Bowers, specifically Carson Beck misses Brock Bowers because he would have been relied on a ton in a game like this. But yeah, I mean, not a banner day for the Georgia offense. Just couldn't get the ball early enough because Georgia really couldn't stop the run game in the way that it hoped to. But thought that Carson Beck made some smart decisions down the stretch. And a Georgia team that still hasn't turned the ball over despite the Oscar Delp fumble didn't start giving the football away because if they did, they lose that game, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm aligned with you on all that. I don't think this is in any way a cause for concern. I think we've seen one of these games a year exactly, right? And honestly, the silver lining here, if you're Stoops, is we've kind of seen that for Mizzou. Kind of, I hate to say it saved Drink's job, but it was one of the banner moments at that point in his career to say, hey, we can hang with Georgia. And then he was able to get it turned around after that, got the offense humming. So if you're Stoops, you could say, okay, well, we've already played Georgia close. Now we just need to be able to trust our offense a little bit more, right? But yeah, that being said, I'm 0%, well, let's call it 20% worried about Georgia in that case because of the injuries, right? And one question that I had going into this one was who is going to be, the guy or the guys in the Georgia front seven that stepped up? Do you feel like we have an answer to that question after this game?
Jalen Walker, dude. Like, he is everywhere. His move off the left side, like, it's unbelievable. Like, he was beating the Kentucky offensive line in several ways. I mean, it did not feel fair. He was feasting. I don't know what his final numbers ended up being. I'm sure he's going to have maybe he's going to have like an SEC defensive player of the week award or like highest PFF grade or something like that. But every time you saw Brock Vandagriff throwing off of his back foot and looking like he was struggling for his life, Jalen Walker was just in his ear. I mean, that guy is making special plays, and it's so fitting that he has a name like that because he's just the combination of like 4 different Georgia players rolled into one. And when
he's made by AI, Kirby just pulled him out of some portal and was like, you know what? We need this, this, and this. We got you, brother.
You know what? AI is crazy these days. I would not rule that out. Like, he was everywhere. And then, I mean, like, that was just the worst scenario for Brock Vandagriff, who's a second late. Everything's a second late. You're like, get rid of the football. Get rid of the football. Even when he's confident, you're like, you should probably be doing these things just a second earlier. And that's what 3 years of sitting on the bench, as much as we can talk about like game reps and how important that is, they're just not all created equal. And I think Nuss is a really good example right now. We're going to get to him in a second, of a guy that, like, because he's gotten at least minimal live reps, he doesn't have that same sort of like, should I trust it? Should I not trust it? And you're seeing that play out right now with Brock Vandagriff. And it's too bad because against that Georgia front that found a way with Jalen Walker to figure things out, like, they were still, I thought, the most superior unit on the field.
Yeah, and I think too, he's not quite athletic enough to do stuff off script Like, I think he kind of profiles almost more as a statuesque quarterback.
What this means is that Georgia and Bama will face off as undefeated top 5 teams in a couple of weeks. And call me crazy, I'm a little bit excited for that. A little bit excited. Not trying to fast forward through next week. Week 4 slate is looking really, really good. Mm-hmm. But Georgia surviving this and Bama winning going away, which we will get to in a little bit, means that we will get these teams facing each other kind of as built. And if Georgia had lost this game or something like that, I think we're having probably a different conversation about that Bama game, despite the fact that obviously this is the 12-team playoff era. This loss wouldn't have been the end of the world. But losing as an unranked team to end this SEC regular season streak would have been just the ultimate head scratcher. I think we would have started having conversations of, is this 2007? Which we always need to have when weird things start to happen. So Georgia avoids that in this game.
Yeah, and I think too, we talked about how this could have been kind of the death knell for Stoops, honestly, because if they showed up and gave up 50 points, if they looked, not committed, if he gives that quote that's like, we're just losing the arms race, I need more money, it could have been the beginning of kind of a messy divorce, honestly, at Kentucky, because I know fans are getting tired of this. I know how frustrating it can be to see that punt decision happen, to see the fumble happen, to see your offense not really trust themselves. But what they did here was they played a Stoops football game. They didn't make the big mistake. They were aggressive in terms of they were trying to push the other team around. They were not too gimmicky. So I think this team does have an identity, and that's what we questioned last week. So I think that's enough in the SEC. I know there's no East anymore, unfortunately, for Kentucky, but that's enough in the SEC to win a couple of games and make your season not a loss, even though you're sitting at 0-2 in conference play.
Only tough part, haven't scored a touchdown yet in SEC play.
Well, that's the negative here. The positive is
gonna need touchdowns. Just that's the
positive is you got the best kicker I think I've ever seen. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, just let him kick from 75 yards out and just hope for the best. All right, Texas A&M, Florida.
The Comedy Central game of the week.
Good Lord. The Billy Napier era, again, as of this recording, is not officially over, but in my opinion, it's over, and he knows that it's over. I think it's very, very clear. If you listen to how he spoke post-game, the chance of fire Billy that were being had when Florida goes into the breakdown 20-0, and they're saying fire, like they're all chanting fire Billy, and Billy says afterwards, yeah, I probably would have been doing the same thing. This guy knows he's cooked. He's cooked. And if you are the last remaining supporter, maybe I'm speaking to Scott Strickland right now, what have your eyes told you is working? Like, give me one thing besides you got DJ Lagway to sign a document and to wear your football uniform. Give me something else that shows you that this is working, because it's 7 consecutive losses to FBS teams dating back to last year. In those previous 6 games coming into this one, Florida allowed an average of 38.7 points. So Saturday's defensive showing, as putrid as it was for Florida, actually brought that average down a touch if we're just talking about the games during that losing streak.
Well, but to be fair, do we know who to blame for that? Because in the pre-show, we talked about Austin Armstrong. We learned that he was like the assistant to the defensive coordinator.
Assistant to the assistant, yeah.
Yeah.
Ron Roberts, one call in place in this one all year. Like that's been we've kind of heard hints of that, and apparently that's what's been happening. Oh my God. Let me give A&M some credit first. I need to give A&M some credit because Colin Klein, the scheming in the ground game, it was there. Didn't have Connor Wigman starting in this one. He ends up being a game time decision. He doesn't end up playing. Marcel Reed kind of picks up where he left off from that bowl game and looks really, really good. A&M looked like it had a plan and it stuck with it. 310 sack adjusted rushing yards. And the fact that A&M was actually able to recognize that early on, we have an advantage up front and we are going to take their will. We do not need balance in this football game. We're going to hit on the splash plays in the passing game. They were able to do that. We're not going to get too crazy with our backup quarterback. And you know what? They won that game going away with it. A&M, first road win in 3 years. A&M deserves all the credit in the world for that. Good on you, Mike Elko, for being able to go into the swamp and win. All right, that was it for A&M.
But And I will say really quick, I'm going to be nice to A&M. A&M's a team that you've seen. I've kind of been bullish on all year because I think they have some talent there. And I think we saw exactly what I like about them, which is like they're a mean physical team that will go to your house and push you around. And I think we saw a little bit of the speed. Granted, everybody looks fast against Florida, but that was my big question was who's the fast guy? Who's the fun guy? We saw a little bit of that. But this is a sound team. This is a team that's better than Notre Dame. They just happened to play them in week 1 when their coaching staff was kind of still trying to find their lockers and everything. But yeah, I think that this team has shown they can hang in these big environments already, which is really encouraging in year 1.
I'm just so baffled though that like I feel bad. I feel bad that I'm not gonna just give A&M all this credit. There'll be time, and if A&M continues to win SEC games, we'll give the Aggies their flowers. But Florida is the clear takeaway from this game, and Aggie fans, you know it. Billy said afterwards, Will, we struggled getting lined up and just executing basic calls, to be quite honest.
Just get on Indeed.com, hire somebody. You'll figure it out.
Somewhere.
Yeah. No, you need an assistant to the offensive. The game changer coach, you need another one of those.
Princely Monmielen was probably just sitting there like on his phone watching this game. You know, they were at Wake Forest, and he's doing the Leo DiCaprio pointing at the TV or pointing at his phone. Like, see, I told you, I was right. He was right. Yeah, I mean, there's no spin zone anymore. There's no spin zone whatsoever. Like, I feel so dumb, and I knew I was going to feel dumb if this is how it played out. And I think Florida fans just feel entirely duped. And Billy doesn't get a pass for that on the defensive side of the ball just because he's an offensive-minded coach, because his answer to solving his defensive problems, again, it was hiring the guy who was fired each of the last 2 seasons, but because he worked for you 5 years ago and you had success in the Sun Belt, you thought that it would work in the SEC, in that it would be the difference in correcting the single most disappointing unit of the 2020s. That was the logic that Billy Napier saw for this, and that he was going to be the play caller that was going to show Austin Armstrong how to properly do his job. That plan has failed. That plan needs to go up in smoke, and that plan should be a major, major part of the Billy Napier obituary at Florida. Has to be, okay?
Right.
They can't figure it. It didn't even matter on the quarter, like what they were doing at quarterback. Okay. So I know that's what we were talking about pregame, like Lagway or Mertz or whatever. And you know what? I'll actually give Billy a tiny bit of credit for putting Lagway in for multiple series in the first half and not just letting him get 3 plays and hand the football off. Like, I don't even care as much about that, because if they don't stop a soul, and if teams are just going to run it down their throat, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And they just don't. They don't have anybody on that team that steps up and says, "Nuh-uh, not today, not in our house." And that is what is so painfully evident, because to me, this is the place that we need to remember that we're at for Florida, because there will be people, you know, this is coming, that when Billy Napier is fired, there will be people that say, Florida fans, they're crazy. Am I right? I hate those people. Those are my least favorite people in this discussion, because you know what? Those people have no sort of context with what is currently going on right now. Are you supposed to wait another 2 years? Are you supposed to wait until like every last fan empties out of the swamp and there's one fan left, and then Billy Napier personally drives that fan home and waves them goodbye, walks them up to their doorstep and says, "Hope you had a good time. I think that you should still believe in me, and we'll get them back next time. I'll see you next week." Is that supposed to be how this is going to end? Because it's not working. It's not working. And there's no way around it. Billy will not make it to October 19th. There's no way that he's making it to that Kentucky game. This is a matter of when, not if. And this is, to me, like such a sad result for a program that told everybody it had this plan. They invested $60 million into Billy Napier. Those buyout numbers right now, Matt Hayes tweeted this out from Steve Berkowitz. It's like basically $28 million plus another 4.5 for the assistants, and the investment that has been made into Billy Napier has been so significant, and it looks like such wasted money. But you know what's a lot more costly? An empty swamp for an entire season.
Yep.
Simple as that. Simple as that. No other way to describe it. Complete and total failure.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is, I don't know what else to say. I saw this from day one. with Billy Napier. I'm not even trying to be mean. And not you necessarily, but pretty much everybody in my life, called me a hater or called me a fan. But what was I wrong about?
I'll say this. I thought this could work. Definitely thought this could work. I think that Florida fans have this hope every time a new hire comes about, and understandably so, because when you've had coaches as good as Florida has had in your lifetime.
Both of them. Total.
2, though. But think about this. Because I think that this is worth the context of like people that say Florida fans are they're unrealistic. They don't have, the proper hope and expectations. Like Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer, 2 of the best 6 coaches of the last 30 years.
Yeah, for sure.
We are both old enough to remember both of those coaches doing extremely well. And when you have had multiple people do this job at such a high level, you are always going to be accustomed to a certain standard and a certain hope more so than anything else that this guy can be that guy. Okay. And that's going to be the case for whoever succeeds Billy Napier. That is 100% going to be it. But I think this is an example of a stubborn head coach.
Hold on. That's not the question. What was I wrong about? From day one. Because this is literally...
Who should Florida have hired?
Now we're going back in time. Florida could have hired... if
we're going to go back in time and say who... But that's...
Florida's own AD said they told Lincoln Riley no. Let's start there.
I would love to know what those conversations
Sure. Let's start there, because that's an easy cop-out to say, what should they have done? Their own AD is on record saying that. So let's start there. So that's an easy answer. But from day one, I said, you guys are hiring the cast of Entourage to run your football program.
It's a good show. Great.
And you know what? And they had plenty of game changer coaches on that staff too. All right. But at the end of the day, these are an unserious group of individuals. Austin Armstrong, I thought he was a joke from day one. Did I spend a day wrong?
I'm thinking about
what was his breakout game? What was his breakout game?
Dude, you got me sidetracked thinking about if Johnny Drama's a game changer.
Oh yeah. Turtle is on this staff, brother.
We're trying to get. I'm actually working to get Turtle on the show. True story.
Yeah,
Jerry
cool guy.
Yeah. The staff hires have been horrid.
Yeah,
absolutely horrid. Like, here's my only point. Because you were right. You're right. The Billy Napier era has been an utter failure. Mm-hmm. Nobody will deny that. You are 100% right about that. I think there are staff hires that guy could have made that would have made it not this. I don't think that every single move made this predestined for...
Which hire did he make that was good? Because I don't think that guy could have made those hires. He got 10 different chances to hire guys and he went 0 for 10. What do you mean?
Right. That's...
I mean, you think you need 12? Who did he hire that worked?
No, I'm saying like all of these hires have gone up in smoke and have failed so miserably. I'm saying that if Billy Napier had recognized from the jump, the thing that could have maybe changed the start of this,
if he was a different human being.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. From the jump, the human being he was not a good fit for this program. He didn't do a single thing right.
It's too stubborn.
Yeah, correct. And that's what I said in the preview. He was arrogant, and he didn't. Because here's the deal: it's not about the Florida fans; it's about the Florida administration. I talked to you about this. I don't know. We have lots of time to talk about this, I promise. But whenever the Mack and Mullen hires happened, I was told repeatedly Florida's a top 5 job in America. Well, that was Strickland and Sass. I don't think that's the case. And it's not about fans having an unfair expectation. It's about the university letting fans down. Okay, let's start there, because this started off as a proud institution. So my thing is, yeah, you could have done better than Billy Napier. The fans deserve better than that. Let's start there. So it's not about, Will wants Florida to fail. It's the fact that the highlight reel from Billy Napier's tenure is a Utah game with Mullins players that you guys told me were losers, with Anthony Richardson, who's a top 5 level draft pick that I was told couldn't play ball. Okay. And then the second part of the highlight reel for Billy Napier is a bunch of Indeed.com job postings. That's the other thing he did right. He hired a bunch of people who looks like he went 0 for whatever. So that's kind of what I'm saying. The hopium for Billy Napier was never on the field. It was never anything that actually happened. It was him saying scared money don't make money and then cashing out his retirement. That was it.
Yeah.
None of this is surprising, shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But the deal is when he was hired, everyone liked him and wanted him to succeed. So they looked with rose-colored glasses at reality. Now we're all looking back at that reality and you're seeing exactly what I saw at the time. This is a dude who was way in over his head, had some modest success at ULL, and wasn't ready for this job that Florida fans have told me is this top 5 job. If you have a top 5 job, don't hire some dude that didn't work at Clemson, who did okay for a second at ULL and was a recruiter and did not know how to scheme. And that's my advice.
Yeah, there could have been there was 3 whiffs with his defensive coordinator hires.
Yeah.
3 whiffs. If he had said from the jump, I'm going to have an offensive play caller.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and even that, you're kind of looking back going, all right, well, even if you had hired a guy who could have consistently come in and had a top 40 offense with that defense, maybe you would have at least had an offensive identity. The highlight of the Billy Napier era is not even the Utah game. It's DJ Lagway. Like, it's getting DJ Lagway. It's getting a guy that regarded. Yeah, it is. 100%. And so I think the question moving forward, because like we will be talking about a coaching search, is like, what does this look like? How will Florida approach this? Because Hopium will be sold again.
Yeah,
I've already shared my list on the show. We did that with Neil, where I went through. I was like, Lane and Golish. I think Lance Leipold would be really, really interesting. I think you could go to even like a Glenn Schumann, a Danton Lynn, if you were willing to.
The Georgia guys are saying Schumann just got extended. I think he's kind of happy. As weird as that sounds.
Extensions for coordinators mean nothing when it comes to accepting power conference jobs.
I think he's happy enough to not walk into that mess.
Potentially.
I'm going to keep being real because I was real from the beginning. Okay, that's all I can say.
there's a chance of that. And Florida fans are saying, I don't want a 34-year-old who's never been a head coach before.
Right.
I don't know that Florida fans are really in a position to say this definitively won't work. This definitively will work.
And I like Golish a lot. I really do. But see, that's what I said to you is I don't know who takes Florida seriously. Like, I'm not even being like, I'm being so objective with you right now. When Mack and Mullen were hired the last cycle, we were talking about Lincoln Riley. We were talking about, these huge names up here leaving where they were to go to Florida. And even, I hate to make everything about LSU, but Brian Kelly was not available when he came to LSU. So it's hard, really hard after Nick Saban leaves and every coach gets re-upped on their deal to go look at a random coach and go, I think he would come to Florida. I just have no idea who values this job or what they value. I'm sure they'll get, whoever it is, or I'm sure they'll get someone who's fine. But point being, this isn't a particularly hard search to go look around the ranks because everyone's either been extended or they're happy or they would wait for another job. And maybe there's a guy who like has a Florida background, grew up in Florida, loves Florida, that could be at the top of this list that we are not even thinking about. And I think that's what it'll be, right?
I mean, Ryan Silverfield showed that he could beat Florida State. With Memphis. Just somebody had suggested that to me, and I was like, "Oh, that's actually." Somebody suggested that to me on Twitter. I'm blanking on who that was. I was like, "Oh, that's actually like not necessarily the craziest thing I've ever heard before." But the search that'll happen will be far and wide. Like I fully expected that would be the case. Florida, to your point, has not poached a Power 5 head coach, or what we would call Power 5, since Spurrier, because remember at the time Urban at Utah, they're still a part of the Mountain West, so it's a little bit different than like, oh, Utah is this Big 12 school, or at I guess Pac-12 is what they went to, and now they're in the Big 12, of course. But
we missed that whole era there. So that's wild. Anyway,
yeah, well, like that's the thing is that they have not gone for the heavy hitter. Neil talked about that of like this sense of urgency of like, would they actually finally be willing to go and poach instead of going for the up and coming head coach? And it will be dissected, but it's very clear this is over and this isn't working. This is done. Stick a fork in it.
And to your point, like this is a positive. I promise. That is arrogance, right? It's not that they couldn't get those guys. So like you could kind of pat yourself on the back and have hope in that and say, hey, Strickland, I hope is playing for his job to whatever level that would be.
They poached Dan Mullen, by the way. I don't know why I just blanked on Mississippi State.
Yeah.
That was a dumb thing to forget. Yeah.
Sorry, but again, Florida connection, like that seemed like a hand in glove fit. That's kind of what I'm saying about some of the Lane stuff. I'm like, Dan Mullen was the easiest decision of all time, to the point where you can't even really blame Strickland for it because it made so much sense.
He was the fourth torch, though. He was not the first, like the number one. Like Frost people like came out and said that he turned that job down, which at the time I was like, that's That's interesting that happened so quickly. Chip Kelly.
But he had Nebraska ties. That's the thing. Same deal with Mullen. Mullen had Florida ties. I don't think Mullen would have left Mississippi State for many other jobs. So this is exactly what I'm saying, is like, you really don't know until it happens. So that's my thing, is that in these other searches, I do believe Florida's had the ability to go get these guys, and I think they've refused it, which is a great place to be. It's not like, well, we lose our guy. Like when Leipold leaves Kansas, sorry, I hate to tell you, brother, but you're not getting another one of those guys. With Florida, they've just decided they don't want to pay the price tag, which at this point does not seem like an option.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We got a lot of stuff to get to today.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the game that is maybe the reason why your voice is, like 75, 80% today. That's understandable. Oh, yeah. That happens. LSU, South Carolina. This was not an SEC game. This was Pac-12 After Dark. It was just played at noon in Columbia, as far as I'm concerned. Turnovers, some horrendous officiating, a game that felt like it could have ended 6 different ways after LSU rallies back from down 17-0, but instead it ends with South Carolina barely missing a field goal that could have forced overtime, a kick that I thought was in when it was off the foot. I was like, we're going to get overtime. This is how this is going to happen. Wild game. A few things. And obviously South Carolina fans, like, I feel for you just from a pure, like, we think we're about to have this moment and now we don't get to have this moment. I totally feel for you. No idea what the offensive pass interference was that negated the long pass play. I get the unnecessary roughness call on Kennard for the late hit because you're trying to protect the quarterback when Nussmeier gets hit on the pick six. It's still a brutal pill to have to swallow when it brings back a pick six. You lost your starting quarterback. You missed a potential game-tying field goal by a foot. To blow a 17-0 lead, to feel like national relevance was there, as I said in the preview pod, success is fleeting. Very, very fleeting. That sucks. But, Will, you pointed out a couple of things that were probably lost in the shuffle a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yes, just a little bit.
And one is that you are right. And I had this very brief moment watching this game as I watched South Carolina leap over LSU to be able to block that punt. And then Beamer ball is off and running, and that place is just rocking. Probably should have been illegal. Brian Kelly said afterwards they're reviewing it with the SEC office. So
let's hold on. Let's do these in order, because everybody was so mad about officiating. I get it. I've received professional feedback, not just here but at work, that I need to be more succinct. So I'm going to try to be succinct here. Horse collar is a rule that was put in about 2008. Connor, you understand that rule? When you saw that first pick six get called back, did you say to yourself, that's a horse collar tackle? So me and you, understanders of football, that was an obvious horse collar tackle. So if you are mad at that call, you don't understand football, right? So
yeah, it sucks that like that was the result. But I agree.
Yeah.
Like that was the play that like you just can't make in that spot. And I think that was correctly called. I don't think everything was correctly called. I thought that was.
For sure. Losing sucks. I understand. So moving on, the hit, the blindside hit on Nussmeier. Okay, so now I'm going to flash back a little bit to the 2022 Florida LSU game where Florida landed on Jaden Daniels. And I said at that time, if you've been paying attention to the game of football from the Pee Wee level to the NFL level, they were trying to regulate this hit out of the game of football. So if you're ever mad, and that hit was even more touch and go. So let me explain something just really quick. In that moment, the priority of the South Carolina football team was not to win that game. The priority of the South Carolina football team was to hit LSU's quarterback in what would objectively be a non-football play, a play that does not factor into the decision of the game. So in that moment, their priorities were, I want to hit LSU's quarterback. So when you make a decision that says, I'm going to hit a defenseless player who is a quarterback, instead of letting my team win in 2024, where this has been a priority for about 15 years, why would I feel bad for that person who could have simply done nothing and won the game?
Yeah, I mean, there's like not everybody's. I'm saying I feel bad for South Carolina fans that thought that they had a victory
for sure, and their player made a boneheaded mistake. I understand. Yeah. So in that moment, why was that so important? I guess is my question, because you've already won the game. So when you make that decision to do that, you've won the game. So, or you've taken away from your ability to win the game. I get it's an emotional sport. Listen, man, I played sports. You played sports. We've been there, right? Now I'll say this: those are right, and I mean not at a very high level. I'm not saying I'm some great athlete. I just know that you have to have. That's why you don't just punch guys in the face. Right? That's why you don't just go out there and do unnecessary things.
I don't know. Punching guys with the helmet on, it's gonna have a moment here where we're like, hey, maybe that's actually not the dumbest thing in the world.
Right. So point being, those are two calls that are objectively officiated correctly. right? When we talk about, okay, here's the horse collar call. Here is hitting a defenseless quarterback in the middle of a play that you didn't need. It was a non-football play. So those are officiated correctly, right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so let's talk about something that actually was not officiated correctly. So, and again, you could talk about the end of the game as you just did about the field goal. We'll get into that. But as a special teams ace, Shane Beamer, despite what we saw yesterday, you have to know that leaping over the shield is a penalty. Now, I sent you a video, Connor, of Iowa, funny enough, another special teams savant team, getting called for leaping over the shield. What did South Carolina do that was different from what Iowa did?
I don't think anything. I also don't think that Beamer addressed it. I don't know that he was asked in the postgame about it. He celebrated
because he knows the rule. That's the funny part. That's why I said, I quote tweeted, I said, I would love to ask Beamer about this because he knows this rule. He's Frank Beamer's son.
Yeah, I bet he does. I bet he does. And at the same time, it's like, you know this game, and if something goes your way, like, you're going to celebrate.
It doesn't count. I get it. So exactly. So we have a rule, 2 rules that have been enforced correctly that people are mad about. And then on the other side, we have a objectively blown call that myself, my friends that are X's and O's guys, you, Brian Kelly, all saw it in real time and went, you shouldn't be able to leap over the shield. That's a clear and obvious penalty. And everyone's going, Beamer ball, Beamer ball, Beamer ball. And that's fine. Okay, that's all fine. I get it. This is a fun, silly game. I'm happy with this being a fun, silly game. When I get out of this fun, silly game and I see professional members of the media making 8 to 10 tweets in a row, opening their WordPress page, going, we got jobbed. This is ridiculous. This was a robbery. And there are no responses to this leaping over the shield call to me. That's where, because like I said earlier, with the Florida thing, I know sometimes I should be more succinct and I get labeled as a fan. But when the Billy Napier thing, I called that from the jump. This is another one where I'm never going to let my fanhood outweigh my kind of like my professional opinion. There's not an LSU game that I've ever said this about, to be clear. There's never been an LSU game where I've gotten on here and said, we got screwed. This is ridiculous. I'm never going to count this as a win. Which LSU game have I done that for in here?
The Dallas Turner hit last year. You're pretty fired up.
Yeah, because that was a non-football play.
Yeah,
I get that. And again, that was a non-football play against a quarterback. Okay, that was, again, but I get it. That's one. Okay, now everyone kind of saw that, right? But at the same time, there's the one, and again, it's a violent play. On the other side of that, I'm not going to make a professional decision to have my professional opinion of a game. As a Saints fan, I'm wearing a Saints shirt. I understand making your whole personality about getting messed over by officiating. It happened to me. I got you that
shirt too. Looks good.
You sure did. Thank you so much. It's kind of got the guns out. I like it. It looks great. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I understand making your whole personality about getting jobbed here, but the more that you guys talk about 2 calls that were made correctly and you don't even address the one that Shane Beamer didn't even address because he knew, probably. You look like you don't know football, especially when you start talking about the horse collar hit that we both went, huh? What do you mean it's a horse collar hit?
Yeah. The play that you brought up that I think is going to be the true moment that Shane, the true decision that Shane Beamer is going to want back in this one is something that, with everything that happened in this game and all that was going on, all the chaos, I don't even think I processed it at the time. I had to go back and be like, wait a minute, they did. You're right. That's exactly what they did. South Carolina, down 3, obviously, at the end of the game, has one more play before it'll set up a potential game-tying field goal, and it's a run play to Rocket that gains 1 yard.
Yep.
Instead of having a high-percentage pass play that can gain 4 yards, 5 yards, or having an offensive line that, like, honestly, South Carolina's offensive line look good. They look good.
Yeah,
they run that Rocket head. They run the Rocket head. They set the edge. They did a lot of things really well in that game.
They pushed LSU around on the offense and defensive line. I mean, what I was scared of to the T happened in this game.
And if they have that play where run play gains 6 yards, they executed in that area. South Carolina's kicking a 42-yard field goal. I think we're going to overtime. I think that kick goes in. And you pointed that out, and I was like, dang, like, that's going to be this type of stuff that's lost. And as much as it's so easy, because you're right, when things don't go your way and you feel like it's just a day in which everything is out to get you and you see it through that lens, it is so easy to forget about those little moments that make a difference in a game like this. It absolutely makes a difference in a game like this. And that was significant. And look, We ripped Gundy a week earlier for doing this, for setting up the 42-yard field goal. It's like, dude, what are you doing? These are college kickers. And setting up a 49-yarder, even if this is Beamer ball, even if you trust your special teams more than anything else, I thought that was a good observation from you after the game and something that's very lost in the shuffle. And if you're a South Carolina fan, like, there are different degrees of frustration that came from a game like this. That should be part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I get being emotional. I'm a fan too at the end of the day. If we want to be emotional and talk about emotions, we can talk about emotions. If we want to talk about factually why South Carolina lost this game, here we go. Okay, South Carolina had everything going for it. They were smashing LSU. They were up 17 points. They were pushing LSU around. LSU had 7 yards of offense through a quarter and a half. Say what you will about the punt block. It counted. Okay, you were in there. You were playing Beamer ball. You were doing everything. Here's why you lost that game. Yeah, you have Dowell Loggins as your offensive coordinator, and you can't generate more than 9 lucky points in a second half of football with a senior quarterback that you brought in through the transfer portal. Okay, you don't trust your senior quarterback to hand the ball to your senior running back. Okay, do we want to be emotional? Do we want to get better, or do we want to feel better?
I thought that play, the throw he made to set up that was actually like kind of nice. I was like, oh, this would be like a good moment for Robbie Ashford if he does that.
He got handicapped by play calling. I completely agree. I that's the thing. The whole thought of, oh my gosh, we have a backup quarterback. Brother, you guys chose to start a young quarterback who you only trusted his legs. You brought in the veteran backup who is a senior. This is your dream. Why did you get that guy out of the transfer portal if you don't trust him to kill an LSU team, to step on their neck when you have them on the mat? You didn't execute in the second half. That's why you lost this game. Okay, I understand blaming officiating. Again, I have a Saints shirt on. I want to be real with you. If you think the reason why you lost LSU is because of officiating and you're not blaming Dowell Loggins right now, this is exactly what I saw talking about Dowell Loggins. I'm not trying to flame the guy. If you come up and you're crushing LSU at halftime and everything is going your way and you have these 2 explosive plays that are going great and every big play feels like it's going your way, and yet you don't trust your quarterback, number one, to drop back and throw the ball. Every play you call is some gimmicky, weird sideways run, and LSU's DBs are saying, God, thank you. My hands are on my knees. I have too much cardio in this game, running up and down, trying to catch Nick Harbor. Throw the ball up, because guess what happened? You did it at the end and it worked.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. I'm like, okay, so what was the purpose of anything that you did this offseason? If you can't, like, because again, if you have Carson Beck, or if you have LSU's situation, Nussmeier, or if you had Jaden Daniels last year and your quarterback goes down and you go, I got a backup, I can't win this game, that's fine. Your backup has played more SEC football than your starter, just so you understand.
Which Beamer said last week against Kentucky when Sellers went out of that game as well. And he had like the 90-second thing with Katie George where we're like, does Beamer know there's a game going on? Because he has really taken a lot of time to explain the Robbie Ashford thing. And like,
good move and good point. He goes on television and hypes up his trust in Robbie Ashford. Where was that? Let him throw the ball, dude. It was single coverage the entire second half. Blake Baker was sitting there with his hangover sunglasses on, daring you to throw that ball. And you did exactly what the defense wanted you to do for an entire half of football. And you got lucky at the end that you had a deep pass play. Imagine that. And then you misunderstood special teams again. And you again, just to be clear, Beamer got his kicker's range wrong. If you want to talk about what we did wrong here, Beamer got his kicker's range wrong. He trusted whatever his kicker told him or whatever, because that's what he told the crew, because that's where that line comes from in the pre-show meetings. They say, here's where my kickers, what I feel good about. You were wrong, because guess what? He missed it twice. And because they got a timeout, which for a veteran kicker and a Beamer ball off special teams should make you feel better. All you had to do is walk over to that kid and go, don't overcorrect. Then he missed it twice from the same range.
Another thing that probably should get some blame, Lenora Sellers ditching the rec specs.
True.
When he came out, when they're rolling, I'm like, he needs to throw those things into the Atlantic Ocean. But like of all the things that you can like point to in that game, and there was a lot. There were some noteworthy developments, very, very noteworthy developments amidst a chaotic game. The matchup that we talked about so much, Garrett Nussmeier, he gets pressured 15 times in this game, but only sacked twice, which I thought that was a great battle. I thought it was really fun. I know Kyle Kennard is going to get ripped for the plays that he made that were flagged, but like I thought that guy was a force. I thought he was a disruptor in that one. And I thought he was really, really good. Rocket Sanders is so back, and that's great to see. Like I love seeing that guy. Holly Rowe talked about how he's down 23 pounds, and it's always the subject with weight with Rocket, which is just kind of weird. But that breakaway run that he had, like you saw the top end speed. I'm happy for that guy because I feel like he has really worked and had to overcome a lot in the last like year to get back to feeling and looking like that. And that's good for South Carolina because they need to have that identity. He looks like he is worthy of being that identity. If this is 2022 Rocket all over again, that would be a great development for South Carolina. Nick Harbor, 2 catches.
Yes.
He caught an out route, and I think I said, Nick Harbor. I like shouted it from my couch, and It was like the most routine play ever. It just goes to show you how weird this thing is. But 2 catches. So that was, again, if you're looking for positives, that's positive. Harold Perkins at the star position. One of 6 LSU defensive players playing in a different position than where he was at week 1. I felt like he was really impactful rushing the passer. That time where Blake Baker sent him through the A gap. I was like, that could work. That might be a good sound strategy moving forward.
You got 6 players playing new positions. Let's run the ball sideways.
Oh God. Yeah.
Genius.
I mean, it was failure. Like it was a failure from that standpoint, especially when
I bet Sage Ryan will cover Nick Harbor 1-on-1. That is a good bet that we should make.
Like Josh Simon needed targets in the second half of that game. He needs second half. Like
they got some dogs on that receiving core, man. I mean, I feel like we needed 2 and 3 guys to tackle everyone.
Yeah. Other takeaway: LSU will be undefeated in SEC play for the Ole Miss game. That is not until October 12th, but that's because UCLA, South Alabama, then a bye, and then the Ole Miss game. So weird that it works out like that, and that it's nothing but SEC opponents from that point out. Anything related to that before I get to one more thing that I want to talk about?
Joe Sloan, who's paying you, brother? Like, which asset? Like, brother, we ran the T formation on the goal line 3 times in a row.
Will, are you selling some Joe Sloan stock right now?
That was insane, brother. I don't know. Like, that's the other thing about this game that makes it hard for me to, like, feel sorry for anyone. I mean, I talked about Garrett Nussmeier is going to have the devastating turnover. He did.
Yeah.
He did. And you guys decided to hit him. Like, what do you, even that turnover should have stopped. Now you ran sideways, so it didn't matter, right? But point being, I think at the end of the day, you got exactly what this game plan followed exactly what you were looking for. Joe Sloan's play calling in this game, it either looked like he had the boys doing taxes in the backfield. I don't understand why when you got 7 yards, you got 3 motions before every play. These tackles, this offensive line is getting eaten alive. You can't just run halfback dive. I'm watching Florida State against Memphis get crushed. 4th and 1, they're doing a QB sneak and pushing guys forward. We can't even figure that out. We're in the T formation, bumping into Josh Williams, throwing the ball. The fact that we're throwing the ball on every big third down in the goal line, the same thing that I keyed in on in the USC game where I said, why aren't we running the ball in the red zone under 2 minutes? You don't want to give the other team a chance. We could even make that case here. South Carolina shouldn't even been across midfield to have Shane Beamer show that he doesn't understand special teams. We shouldn't have even been there. But Joe Sloan decided to throw the ball 3 times in a row at the goal line with under 2 minutes left. There were so many opportunities to win this game. I'm actually disgusted by how many times LSU should have lost this game. They played so freaking poorly on the road. College game day was there. Everybody was up at 4 a.m. The place was rocking. Sandstorm was going. I watched my life flash before my eyes, and Dowell Loggins said, not so fast, my friend.
Not the best game for both these offensive coordinators, despite what the final score said. Yeah, I agree. It looked like they had that snap when LSU was running that goal line play that Nussmeier kind of anticipated pressure. He was like tripping over his offensive lineman. It looked like the entire South Carolina defensive line had the snap count just perfectly timed. I think it was Kennard that got in there and forced that pressure and that weird sidearm throw that didn't have any chance whatsoever. Yeah, I was stunned actually that LSU was able to punch it in at the end with Josh Williams. LSU doesn't.
And why was Josh Williams playing? Caden Durham comes in. Yeah. Caden Durham looks like the happiest. Like John Emery comes out inexplicably and looks awesome, and then tears his ACL. They go, oh my gosh, I gotta see more Josh Williams. Caden Durham comes out, has 2 of the sickest. I mean, for long touchdown runs, like disgustingly awesome touchdown runs in this game, we had so many. We had 2 from Durham. We had the Sellers one before he got banged up. We had the 2 Rocket ones were awesome. Both of those ruled. And we're sitting there and I go, oh my God, we have Josh Williams and we might not even run the ball here. But Durham could have 3 touchdowns. So yeah, there's a lot. There are positives in personnel wise for both of these teams to really be excited about because a lot of guys broke out despite their coaches in this game.
Yeah, the Sage Ryan draft film will not have that tackle attempt of Lenore Sellers on it. I'm just going to say that. That's pretty safe.
Coming to a local Publix near you.
Dude, they didn't even get through. I don't even think. Goodness gracious. I hope Sage Ryan has a good life. Let me be on record saying that. Fowler didn't even get through like the. I don't even know if Sellers reached the goal line yet before he was already saying Sage Ryan whiffed on that tackle, and you're like, oh my God, yeah, it was pretty bad. It was even worse than the replay. Okay, on a very different note, one of the highlights of my career was having Reese Davis botch my stat on College Game Day for the lead-in.
That was awesome.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He called it, and I love Reese. You know that. He called us Saturdays Down South, and that he said that Game Day confirmed Saturday Down South stat that South Carolina is playing as an unranked team for the 111 time in the last 114 games. It was actually 110 and 113. I had already done the math for them. They added one to it. I don't care. It's beyond cool. It is beyond cool that our company got a shout out on Game Day, especially when I spent probably like 15, 20 minutes researching that stat that they could have easily just ripped off and just not credited me, and nobody would have ever known that. But the fact that they took the time for the lead in to this game to be like, they dug into I think it was my like early thoughts on this game that I had that stat. And, or you know what, maybe no, it was like a Tuesday column that I wrote about like this being such a prime opportunity for South Carolina with Game Day in the house, all that stuff. And the fact that got a mention was just like, it was very, very cool. It really was. And like, you know, it's one thing to have like, to get all these awesome opportunities, like to go on Feinbaum or something like that, or to have like an interview with Tebow, where Tebow says at the end of it, like, hey, like, I appreciate the fact that like you actually like watch and like feel like you know your stuff, or having Herb Street reach out and be like, hey, like I read your, like those moments have all been incredibly freaking cool. And this was up there, and I'm extremely grateful. And the fact that people read our stuff is the only reason that type of thing ever sees the light of day. So I was incredibly grateful, and my day was already a win at 11:59 a.m. It was awesome. Really cool.
Yeah, I'm glad that I started that game with that, to be honest, because I needed it for a minute. But yeah, I know that you're a big we guy, and that's one thing I really respect about you. But at the end of the day, a lot of that's you, man. I mean, I think at the end of the, like, you know, you do the research, you allow, you know, I see these giant Google Docs, and it's good to see when that gets rewarded, and the people that matter are seeing it. And you know, it's something that I often joke about. Like, I can't think about it too hard, because I would just get like, oh my gosh, people are listening to what I'm actually saying. I sound like crap. What I'm saying doesn't make any sense. But you know, the amount of research and work that you put into this, I really see it. And then, you know, try to give you a fraction of that back, but it's super duper cool to be part of the conversation in that way.
Love it, man. Love it. Success. And hopefully singular Saturday down south next time. That's next time. That's fine. We got something to work for. That's all that means. All right. Bama, Wisconsin. It sucked that Tyler Van Dyke, your boy. Can I still call him your boy? Is he still... Have you sold that
he needs all the hopes and prayers he could get. Yeah, he's got to be somebody's boy. It's just me and Fickle now.
That's true. Oh, man. It sucked that he went out in the opening series of that game. But there's not a single quarterback in Wisconsin history who could have prevented that outcome. Not even Russ.
Russell Wilson slander? No. Wow.
Yeah, I'll slander it. And Russ, trust me, I'm a big Russ Wisconsin appreciator. I thought he was so insanely good that year. Not even he would have led Wisconsin to a win. They don't have the dudes. They do not have the dudes. Bama had a huge bounce back week on offense. Milroe looked like the guy that we saw in the latter half of last season, with like a couple of the DeBoer wrinkles in there. And I think that was such a positive for Bama. It amazes me so much how upset it makes people that his drives every single time aren't these like 12-yard pass plays where he's just being surgical. You know, it's like, and I get it. If we want to have a conversation about his NFL draft stock, that's perfectly fine to say that. Okay. Like that, you're not going to be able to do all the things that he does, and that will not always translate. So I get it. That should be a separate conversation. But you know, it's so hard to defend, because even Kirby Smart himself could not find the right answers to defend it. A guy that can throw on target deep balls, but also hit you with a 50-yard rushing touchdown if you forget about that aspect, because that is what Jalen Milroe continues to do. And it's not a finished product. It's not a finished product in the intermediate passing game. I'm not saying that it is. But every single week this season, Milroe, despite some up and down moments, he has had at least one play that makes me think he is really progressing in that area and progressing in this offense. The dart that he had to Ryan Williams in week 1 over the middle, that Williams, you know, is able to get through a couple of Western Kentucky defenders, go to the house. That play, thought was great progression from Milroe. The rocket that he threw to Kobe Prentice that we talked about against USF last week, where he's stepping up in the pocket, it almost undoubtedly is going to be a Milroe run. Instead, he cocks it and boom, Bama touchdown in a key spot. And then the ball that he threw on that corner route, whatever you want to call it, I can't remember what exactly the start of the route was, where he hits Jeremy Bernard. Perfect placement to be able to hit him in the end zone, like just a spot that only he can get to, drops it in a bucket. Milroe is trusting this offense more and more. And I know that's something that like the non-Alabama fans like that they do not want to hear. And I'm not saying that the box score is going to reflect that each and every week, but if you watch some of the plays that are being made, I think it definitely shows that. And obviously, competition, part of it, that is easier to do against Western Kentucky. It's easier to do against USF, even though we are Alex Golesh respecters, and obviously a rebuilding Wisconsin team that, again, does not have the dudes. But you're seeing maturation. It is there. And it's a great note that ESPN Stats and Info had. He is the first FBS quarterback to start 3 games with multiple passing touchdowns and multiple rushing touchdowns since 2010 Colin Kaepernick. First quarterback to do that at any point in the season for 3 consecutive games since Johnny Manziel and Jordan Lynch did it 2012.
Jordan Lynch, back.
Love me some Jordan Lynch. NIU, having a moment. But yeah, I do think like Milroe against Georgia is going to be a phenomenal test. I cannot wait to see what that looks like. The year-to-year adjustments that Kirby's going to make. It's a different offense, obviously, that he's preparing for, different pass catchers, all those different things. But I am excited. I find myself so unbelievably fired up for that matchup because of some of these little wrinkles and some of these moments, not just the box score, but those moments from Milroe that suggest there is room to grow. And it's not just this is what he is at this point of his career, and he will never get any better.
He's medically got that dog in him. Right. It's like to that point where it's like it doesn't matter what's. Yeah, he's got so many dogs in him of all dogs getting larger as you go north. Like he's just so the fact that whatever system you put him in, he's going to ultimately be a version of like trusting himself. And I think part of that comes from starting off with Bill O'Brien being like, "Hey, brother, maybe you shouldn't be a quarterback." He's like probably had to look in the mirror and be like, "Hey, here's what I'm about. Like here's what I do. I could chuck it down the field. I can throw the ball over the mountains right there. And when plays break down, I will torch you." And I think that adding, this offense to that, where, okay, we're going to make things look a little bit easier for you. We're going to build in a little bit more of that run game. The offensive line will also be in attendance at portions of the performance, things like that. I think that, last year it was just so criminal what he was able to do. We talked about this with Tommy, who I called Pete last time because he just looks like a Pete, I guess. But he just looks like a Pete. I think that's what it was. I don't even think it was Pete Golding. But like I said, it's the fact that when he gets off script, get your popcorn ready, for lack of a better term, right? Because on script, he's great, and especially like I'm hearing some type of a theme music when I think of Ryan Williams now. It's not good. I'm seeing he's like the Leviathan walking out of the tunnel. Like it's terrifying.
I'm glad that we had the preseason context of freshman receivers in the SEC, and I kept bringing it up like last 8 seasons. Jalen Waddle's the only true freshman receiver in the SEC to have 800 receiving yards, so that it makes us appreciate what Ryan Williams is doing even more. Because I don't know if you've heard that he's only 17 years old.
He missed his prom.
How many catches has Ryan Williams had this year in which that has been brought up? Because I think it's 90% of them.
Yep. I love that. Yeah.
Great. He's 17.
There are some guys too. Like they did that with Thurman. I was like, you know what? That's actually good context because you look older than me. Like sometimes guys, you're like, hold on, that guy's a freshman. And like with him, it's the fact that he makes grown men reconsider their professions, I think is really why you gotta.
Bama and Ryan Williams and Milroe, Bama defense, by the way, which that's going to be a fun matchup as well against Carson Beck in a couple weeks. I am looking forward to that aspect as well. Bama was so dominant in this game that at some point, like middle of the third quarter, I think it was, Gus Johnson's kind of looking to fill some airtime, and he's like, I'm like, God, I was about to do a Gus Johnson. I'm not going to do a Gus Johnson. But he says to Joel Klatt, he's like, have you ever been to an SEC game? Because there's nothing like going to an SEC game.
Joe Klatt's like, there are so many things better you don't understand.
Joel Klatt
that was a Joe Klatt impression, actually.
Joel Klatt had like, God, he had like 5 seconds of silence, I think it was, before he's like, actually, since I've been doing this job, I haven't been able to get down there, which understandably so. It's hard to get everywhere. I get it.
Checks out.
You also can't be Mr. like anti-SEC and then be like,
and not even go
to an SEC game. Like,
he's like, I'd rather be at a funeral, brother. I hate SEC games. What do you mean?
He said, like, I'm impartial to dotting the I. And Gus Johnson was, which, look, I did not expect Gus Johnson to say on Fox, have you ever been to an SEC game? Because there's nothing like it. That's how dominant Bama was in this game.
Yep.
And they were very much wishing that instead of watching Camp Randall filter out immediately after Jump Around, which, by the way, Bama took part in. And I can't remember the Bama player afterwards who was trashing that weak song.
Yes. Oh, I saw that. I forgot who it was, but it was funny. Yeah.
Song's not weak. Song's not weak. Jump around is cool. It's cool. There's nothing. I will not stand for that. I will say that Bama has every right to jump around. Every right. You better enjoy that experience, especially when you're up big. Mm-hmm. Jump around is not weak. We do not need to call that tradition. There are some weak traditions. You want to call it turnover chain weak? I'm here for it. That's fine.
Turnover Mardi Gras beads in the Tulane game, by the way. Pretty fire.
All right, I can hear that out. That I can get on board with. But
I will say though, at some level, right? Sorry, I just cut you off. But like, at some level, right? We are like the SEC meme, or I am at the end of the day as an SEC fan, which is like I could joke about Alabama all day, but the joy it brings me to watch Joel Klatt talk about Wisconsin's GPA, in the third quarter of one of these games when Bama's doing jump around and he's sitting there with his arms crossed saying, "I've never been to the SEC." That makes me smile. I'm going to be so honest with you because again, I don't let my feelings really get in my professional opinion the way some of these guys. And again, we're talking about one here, Will, but it's so funny to me to hear, okay, yeah, Bama's actually loving jumping around. We agree. We think that's a great decision. Even if we think it's weak, we'll partake because we're not particularly stressed at this point in our day.
Who doesn't like a little mid-game jump? There's nothing wrong
Connor
with
was about to suit up when they dumped on jump around. He was like, that's enough. I'm putting on a helmet right now to defend that song's honor.
Come on, House of Pain. It's one of the definitive songs of the 90s. Let's not trash that. Come on. What do we need to do that for? All right. Let's get to Boston College and Mizzou. Ranked showdown. Only ranked showdown of the day it was. Mizzou fans, I'm saying this out of respect to you. I respect you, Mizzou fans. Adam Spencer. All my Mizzou fans that are in my life, I am speaking as someone that is on your side, okay? But you don't look like the number 6 team in the country, and that's perfectly fine. That's fine. That's okay, okay? Do not get defensive. Don't get defensive. Nobody ever responds well when you tell them not to get defensive, by the way. I don't recommend that tactic. I can only say that because you're on this and not a Mizzou fan. I will not dismiss the fact that Mizzou beat a top 25 team after rallying from being down double digits, which, look, wins are hard. Wins are really hard. Go ask the state of Florida outside of Miami. Actually, you know what? I don't want to. UCF shouldn't be part of that conversation.
Oh, that win was hard.
That win was hard. Wins are hard. Yeah. Sometimes not hitting the 2.5 point spread to cover for Connor's lock of the week is also really hard. But that's a different discussion for a different time. But look, I think Mizzou, you deserve to enjoy that and do not fear the worst. I'm not saying that. But even Mizzou fans can admit that you do not operate like that ranking suggests you operate. Number 6 teams in America usually don't get a 2nd and 59. That is almost impossible. 2nd and 59, Will. And usually they don't get to 2nd and 59 by having their best player toss a ball at a defender and then take a guy's mouth guard and toss that as well to get 2 15-yard penalties. 2nd 59.
We used to say back in the day, 3rd and Nebraska.
I like that. Let's bring that back. Dude, that wasn't 3rd in Nebraska. That was 3rd in Hawaii. That was 2nd Hawaii.
There was zip codes between you and the first down.
Continental, cross-continental flight for that one. Drink laid in to Burden for that, by the way, which I'd love to know how many times he's done that publicly. Now, privately is a different story, but how many times he's really gotten after him because he just lost his composure. And, fortunately for Burden, he was exceptional at some very key moments in this game. He made the big play to put the game on ice late. And of course, Brady Cook is going to turn him in that spot after really first 20 minutes of that game. Luther Burden III did not have a touch. And you're kind of wondering, is he still feeling the effects of last week? I know he left with the illness. It's just kind of a slow start to the season. And look, it was not just that Burden's day was kind of up and down. Boston College took advantage of a couple of those coverage busts. They jump out to that 14-3 lead. And the good news is that Brady Cook, I think 2 years ago, he presses in that spot. He tries to do too much. Mizzou doesn't win that game. They don't come back. But Mizzou at this stage with this version of Brady Cook understands, all right, it's not the end of the world. We feel like we can actually move the football. We have more than enough weapons to be able to turn to. This is not going to be a game in which we have to necessarily just be like, oh my God, we're going to need a Harrison Mevis field goal from 80 billion yards. By the way, Harrison Mevis isn't with Mizzou anymore. You get what I'm saying. But they didn't have to panic in these moments. And Mizzou was able to make enough of those defensive plays down the stretch, and they were able to close out a win. They didn't cover the spread. Oh, well, whatever. I am not saying that Mizzou is the F word. Fraud, by the way. Right. Fraud is the F word. But I am saying that we're not going to know if Mizzou is legit unless they go into College Station and win. Though, what will that really tell us? Because the last team that went into College Station and won lost the following week to Northern Illinois. So so official fraud watch, that's the F word. It goes into UMass. Because that's after that. If Mizzou,
hey, they're lucky they got this one at home. I started to say that. If it was down the road thanks to their AD, they would have been in a different situation.
Do you think if this game was played at Boston College like it was a few years ago that Ryan Bamford goes to that game? Because I think there's 100% chance he does and just stalks the sideline. Little Connor Stallions, little disguise that he's got.
Who are you, sir? Schmamford. Anyway.
If Mizzou can go into Ryan Bamford's house and win convincingly in October, I won't even mention the possibility of Mizzou being the F word. All right? That's my deal to you, Mizzou fans. You get it. You guys all are nodding your head. Whether or not you want to admit it or not, you're nodding your head. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll call them another F word, which is fun. Here's the thing about Mizzou. Here's the thing about Mizzou. They have proven that they will play to any competition they see. We talked about the close Georgia game. They had a close Georgia game last year. They made Tennessee rethink some things last year, right? But they also, and I know I'm giving like lots of examples here, but like point being, they will move like to the level and really find you at your level. This is like where I'm going with Mizzou here. It is kind of funny. I just talked about Bill O'Brien not really trusting, Milroe early in his career, and now he has Tommy Castellanos, who is one of the most mercurial quarterbacks I've ever watched in my life. He is a guy who will just try to make every play. I'm sure Bill O'Brien, I love him. He's so fun. Watching Bill O'Brien actively lose hair on the sidelines is so funny to me because he started off being like, I don't trust this type of quarterback, and now he's stuck with like a more risk-prone quarterback. I love that. That's always fun. Point being, yeah, I mean, I'm with you here, right, in that Mizzou will find – when you watch a Mizzou game over the course of our lives, right? And there were a couple of years where it was like not fun under Odom, but even when the defense was laughably bad, it's like what the old, like, I can imagine like an old school baseball broadcaster saying, every time you watch a baseball game, you see something you've never seen before.
I used to say that all the time when I interned for the Indianapolis Indians, like something new every day, guys. And it always played. It got like at least 2.5 chuckles.
Yep, exactly. And every time you watch a Mizzou game, you're going to see something you've never seen before. And we saw that in the ranked matchup with Boston College, with the Burden play you talked about. Again, playing Boston College with Bill O'Brien and having that happen is one of the most inexplicable things I've ever thought about or I've ever seen when you really think about it. And yet Mizzou will average about 2 of these moments a game. And that's why I'm so in love with them being good with this group of guys, because I really need to prioritize their viewing. Again, like the Florida game last year was wire to wire. I was on a plane like trying to like watch that. So yeah, I love Drink. I love the way he does things. I think it's fun. I think it's funny. I think we need more of this in college football. We're like, this is old school. We saw an old school game between Georgia and Kentucky earlier. These are the things I don't want to lose as we move towards the corporate era of college football. This was such a fun, silly game.
You know what I can lose, though? That robotic dog that Drink had before the game on College Game Day.
So weird.
He came on game day and had this little smile. What's Drink doing right now? And then they do the wider shot and they show that he is walking with a robotic dog because Drink lives to try and troll Kiffin. And so he's like, hey, he's got Juice Kiffin. How about this? And yeah, the robotic dog, look, I know that thing's really expensive, but if Mizzou had lost that game, that thing would have been punted very, very far by Drink. He would have been very mad at himself. I hope that thing wasn't near Luther Burden at different points of that game because, I mean, goodness gracious, that would have been a very expensive thing to replace. But Mizzou wins, and that's the good news. Mizzou can win ugly at this stage.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was a nice cherry on top of that game.
Yeah, weird game, weird cherry on top of it. All right, let's close out with this one before we get to some overreaction or proper reaction. Not a ton that I need to discuss, I feel like, with Ole Miss and Wake Forest because this was so lopsided, and it speaks to the complaint that I have about Ole Miss games. Well, they're over before that I remember that they're on.
Yeah.
They score too quickly. And now that they have a defense, the other offenses have no chance of actually making things interesting. The only thing that's interesting by the time that I turn on an Ole Miss game is how long Lane is going to leave Jackson Dart in. So it's not like we all of a sudden stop getting explosive plays. Those were their kind of all game. He left him in all game in this one. And he threw a ball to Juice Wells down the left sideline that I was watching. Live on the CW, which we'll get to in a second here. And he made just this like casual one-handed grab, and I was like, Juice Wells confirmed back. I'm sure South Carolina fans didn't enjoy seeing that, but for Ole Miss fans that are hoping that he's going to be like the preseason All-SEC guy last year, who he was 2 years ago, that was a good sign of that. It is not fair that Ole Miss can just do that in a 33-6 game in the middle of the fourth quarter. The broadcast crew on the CW, by the way, the CW, yeah, that's where we're at, with the infamous Tom Brenneman on the call, said something to the effect of like, well, that'll do it after that. And I'm like, what game were you watching? Because when I flipped over to this game in the middle of the first quarter, it was like 20-3 already. And Jackson Dart looked like he was already just messing around and having fun. And this was like an intra-squad scrimmage. But sure, I get that you have to sell a competitive game. But yeah, Dagger, I guess. All right. That place was empty.
I can't let this continue anymore. I had this game in a multi-view. You're telling me who was on the call here?
Tom Brenneman. Yep.
Was he wearing his headset again?
He was. Tom Brenneman of Nick Castellanos fame, who, by the way, I'm not sure if Thomas Castellanos has the same pronunciation. It might be Castellanos. And we're like, I saw both variations yesterday, just as we have with Nick Castellanos, the very infamous, maybe the most infamous apology in the history of announcing.
So that solves the mystery. He put the headset on again and called college football on CW. Okay.
Yes. Good. Yes. He was doing, I think, like Mexican's Winter League for a little bit, but now he is on the CW of this game. I had it on multi-view for a bit as well. There was like CW doesn't let you do a whole lot with multi-view, which is really annoying on YouTube TV. I'm still a multi-view guy. Don't get it twisted. I am. But yeah, this was, it was weird hearing that. It was just a weird game all around from that standpoint of like the optics of it and how strange it was to hear that voice. You're like, why am I listening to this? But anyway, Jackson Dart took a nasty hit in this game, takes his helmet off, gets flagged, and is jawing with Wake Forest. I kind of loved it, Will. I kind of loved it. He wouldn't have done that 2 years ago. He would have taken the hit for sure, because that's just what Jackson Dart does. But he did this thing where he like popped his helmet off and just let Wake Forest have it, and credit to CW rising in terms of production. They like captured his like close up of like him like nodding his head. And I was like, I can get behind that. I kind of like when a quarterback does that. I tweeted out the video. I was like, Jackson, Jim McMahon Dart, a little bit. You can't say that he's leading the Heisman race when he hasn't played anyone yet. But
the Heisman race is a mess, I guess. Anyway,
yeah, it really is. But like, he looks nearly perfect, and he's playing with a defense that hasn't allowed a touchdown yet, which happened for the first time since 1961, the John F. Kennedy administration. That's the last time Ole Miss has started off this well on the defensive side of the ball. R.I.P. JFK. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
R.I.P. JFK. What else can we say?
Yeah. Ole Miss defense loses Jared Ivey. That's a bummer. But Georgia Southern next week, then Kentucky and Oxford. And by the way, Kentucky hasn't scored a touchdown in 2 SEC games so far.
Mm-hmm.
Will Ole Miss enter October having not allowed a touchdown on defense with potentially a top 3 Heisman candidate at quarterback? That feels certainly possible. Very much.
Yeah. With old Tommy Golding. Yeah, I think
that's a good callback.
It's hard to tell, like, really, because their schedule. I hate to be that guy, but like, that's kind of been, hate to be, whatever, but to bring things back. But that was the thing with Pete, was about these big games, right? So I'm really fascinated by Ole Miss because, I mean, man, they're swagged out right now. Oh, they're feeling it. They're feeling it.
Uniforms.
Yeah. They're feeling it. And like, it feels like pretty much every one of those teams outside of like 2019 LSU or maybe one of the Florida teams has ended up meeting some kind of justice whenever you start to get out there and you really start feeling it and mossing on people and every game having the clips. But like, this is a team that's having fun on that level. Like, I'm finally ready to say I've seen a team that's had that level of fun that 2019 LSU had. Now, not talking about talent, not talking about ability, just talking about having fun. But I need to see it in the big game. Like, I desperately want to see it in the big game because they're fun to root for.
Very much. Henry Parrish is currently the leader in the Philip Dukes term boomerang transfer of the year. Henry Parrish, also the potential Steve Buscemi from Billy Madison Award. I'm glad I called that guy, which Lane did post spring. Looks awesome. Looks really great in that offense, and getting the obviously the lion's share of the carries with Logan Diggs still being banged up. So Very, very nice start for Ole Miss. All right, Will.
Yep.
Overreaction or proper reaction? Let's start with this one. Arch Manning is the new QB1 in Austin.
Sure.
It's an overreaction. It's an overreaction. Great for Arch. You know what? I am happy for that kid because Quinn Ewers leaves this game. Weird injury. Like, couldn't really make out what it was at first, and it ends up being a strained abdomen. TBD on kind of what his status is going to be moving forward with the schedule, the way that it sets up. Would not surprise me if we saw them be really conservative with his return. Probably doesn't really bode well if you put a future on him to win the Heisman. Missing power conference games doesn't really bode well for that. But Arch steps in and like his first 2 scrimmage touchdowns. And
yep,
the run that he had, longest run by a Texas quarterback since Vince Young, 2005. That'll get the folks fired up. Nice little wiggle. He's like, I got that from my mom. I didn't get that from my dad. Shots fired just directly into the face of Archie.
I heard somebody say that's the first time I've ever heard the word sneaky athletic and believed it was Arch Manning.
Yeah, a little bit. But like the timing is still a little bit. It's a little bit different. There were some moments where you're like you like tip passes and stuff like that. He does the arm angle stuff a lot, and I still think there was so much more good than bad. To me, this is just like what we talked about all off season though, and why his development, as much as we're going to overreact to everything, it's important because in the likely event that Quinn Ewers is going to miss some time at some point, you'd like your quarterback to not be a total liability. And so far, like I thought that was a really, really nice start. Also, this is a dumb thing to bring up here, but I'm going to bring it up anyways. I kind of love that Arch has like all these handshakes with everybody else on the team. Like he's got. I kind of wondered about that. Is he going to be the guy that's like, oh, that's Manning. He's off doing his own thing. Like we talked about with the college football video game that he didn't opt into, and then he ended up opting into. It's like, is he going to be kind of like on his own island the entire time?
You didn't know. This is gonna like whatever. I'll get out of it quickly. You really don't know if you're gonna get almost like RFK Jr. vibes out of him because he's so far removed from the whole thing. Like he's Cooper's son. You're like, is this guy like the lost Manning? Like what's going on with him? And then you see him play like, oh, this is a new kind of Manning. This isn't like a weirdo Manning. This isn't some Manning that is just like been off doing his own thing. We haven't seen anything. To your point, he's been very PR heavy. And you see him play, and you're like, oh. This is fun. They're keeping under wraps. It's not some socially awkward kid. He's too fun. Is the problem with him?
Yeah, and he's progressing too. Like I really thought he made those steps in the spring. So who knows? It looks like we're going to see a lot more. We could be seeing a lot more of Arch. Again, it was UTSA. Take that for what it is. But yeah, that was a really, really nice showing. And kind of the silver lining, of course, unfortunately, Ewers getting hurt. That is just a trend that continues to repeat itself. Okay, overreaction or proper reaction? Mississippi State might have won its last game of 2024.
They might have gotten worse than last year, man.
Will, this is a proper reaction because I want you to do me a favor right now.
Oh, okay.
I want you to pull up the Mississippi State schedule for the rest of the season because losing that way at home to Toledo, so much worse, obviously, than what happened last week at Arizona State.
Well, luckily they have a team worse than Toledo next week, which is Florida at home. So I think they'd be favored in that one, right?
Goodness, that is. Everybody's going to call that a toilet bowl game. I'm just going to call it the Dan Mullen Bowl and move on. Keep scrolling on that schedule until you get to the next.
In Austin, in Athens. Oh.
Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, A&M in Starkville, Arkansas, Starkville, UMass, Tennessee, Mizzou, Ole Miss.
You had me at UMass, Will. Is Ryan Bamford
no way, right?
Going to rally the troops, the Minutemen? I know they're 0-3. I know it's Don Brown. I would never bet on Don Brown. I don't bet, period. But if I did, I would never bet on Don Brown. Is Mississippi State going to lose to UMass? They can't. They can't.
They can. Once you lose to Toledo, you can lose to anybody, even maybe Florida.
Toledo is bottom 15 in the country in percentage of returning production. It's like as much as like, okay, that's like a team that's been really solid in the MAC. You know, Jason Candle is kind of one of these up and coming coaches. It's a respected program, and it's a great win for them. Absolutely great win. Totally inexperienced, and to come into Starkville and look like that. Let's just say I don't feel terrible about predicting that Mississippi State was going to go winless in SEC play this year. That was bad. Really, really bad.
you got two kinds of Ole Miss fans: the ones that are freaking out about Lane Kiffin and the Florida thing, or the ones that are just laughing at Miss State. And be one of those second guys, because that's a much more fun guy to be.
Yeah, seriously. All right, overreaction or proper reaction? Hank Brown is the answer to Auburn's quarterback problems.
Hank Brown.
Great name. Great name. I'm not going to say it's a proper reaction because you played well enough against New Mexico. He's got a little bit more comfortability. That will look. Could Peyton Thorne have done that against New Mexico? Yeah. Did he do it against New Mexico State? No.
Do we know that? That's the thing. I'm just gonna start questioning everything. The data says yes.
What we do know is that Hank Brown might be trying to do a Jackson Dart imitation. Tell me he's not trying to do a Jackson Dart imitation. A little bit.
Just be your own person, guys. We don't need more Dylan Raiolas in this world.
Dylan Raiola, just do your own thing, man. Hank Brown will be the starter next week against Arkansas. Hugh Freeze announced that afterwards. I'm going to give Hugh Freeze a tiny bit of credit there for being willing to pivot this early. I think a lot of coaches would dig their heels in even more.
Is it early to pivot off of Peyton Thorne? I would argue it's late.
You're right. This early in the season.
Give me Robbie Ashford. I'll say it again. Two coaches have now said he can't throw the ball. I don't know about that.
Yikes. Anyway. Robbie Ashford is a Joe Moorhead product. He could probably figure it out.
There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, like this early in the season to realize, buddy, if we just go 6-6 again, hot seat going into year 3, he knows how this goes. You have to figure this out now. And Hugh Freeze is going to turn him. Let's see how he looks against SEC competition. Let's see how he looks against a defensive coordinator and Travis Williams that I continue to have respect for, despite the fact that Arkansas didn't look particularly good against UAB. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Too early to say that Hank Brown is going to absolutely be the answer at the quarterback position, but it felt good. And Auburn's learned to appreciate wins against the state of New Mexico.
Yeah, 1-1 against them. I think that at the end of the day, you just give me something. Just give me something, bro. Like, even if it's bad, like, give me a new bad. Like, that's the thing. Like, just turn the page, please. I'm so glad we did this.
Okay, let's do this last one, Will. Tennessee is going to hang half 100 in Norman. College Game Day going to be in the house. First time that College Game Day is going to Norman with fans since 2012, the Notre Dame game, Manti Te'o. Heisman campaign kind of launched in that one. Been a long time.
They say Brian Kelly can't win big games.
Anyway, that was one of his biggest wins at Notre Dame. Maybe his biggest win at Notre Dame. I'm going to say that's a slight overreaction, even though Tennessee's put up at least half 100 in every game this year.
They're going to need some help from Jackson Arnold. That's the thing. They'll need a little bit of help from their friends, but
help in the form of like a pick six. Are you saying?
Yeah.
I'll say it's a slight overreaction just because I think the Oklahoma defense will easily be the best defense that Tennessee has faced so far, and kind of wait and see what it looks like. True road atmosphere for Nico. First time he is going to be playing in a true road atmosphere. We'll see what it looks like with the communication. All those things are going to be a question for the Josh Heupel reunion. But what Tennessee's offense looks like is just it's like if you just tuned into a game and you had it on multi-view or something like that, you would be under the impression that they're just showing highlights the entire time. Everything is highlights. It's just, oh, look at that crease. Oh, he's gone. Oh, Dylan Sampson touchdown. Oh, Bishop, he's touchdown. Oh, Nico just dropped that one in a bucket to Chris Brazel. That's a touchdown too. Everything is a highlight. There are no just 3-yard runs and a cloud of dust. Every single thing. It's been unbelievably impressive. I am so fired up for that game next week. That's going to be great.
Man, I mean, yeah, we need some help from the Oklahoma defense because Dylan Sampson's making us look silly for not considering him for the SEC rushing leader.
I'm mad at myself.
That dude is he's real good, man. And it's Josh Heupel with an actually kind of competent quarterback. I mean, where else but the NIL era of SEC football can you see a dude named Ayamaleava throw the ball to a dude named Squirrel White? I love this silly sport. But yeah, I mean, that Oklahoma's defense, in my opinion, has been really good. It's the fact that their offense is so bad. I'm not kidding. Jackson Arnold is the biggest asset to Tennessee's offense right now because their defense is I like the matchup. It's going to be a good test. Oklahoma defense versus Tennessee offense. When you're throwing that Jackson Arnold is also on Tennessee's team at times, I think that makes it a little bit easier for Tennessee.
Important that Jackson Arnold uses his legs in this one because might be running for his life at times. He used his legs very, very effectively against Tulane, a game that got way too close for comfort down the stretch. But Oklahoma still ends up covering the spread in that one. But Oklahoma fans were like, what is this drought that's going on right now? Because they just have too many of these lulls in this game, and you cannot have lulls against Tennessee. You will not be a team that good. They're going to easily have to play their best game of the season in order to somehow survive that against a Tennessee team that's off to a red hot start. Okay, that's a pod, Will. That was a loaded pod. Week 3 is in the books.
Mm-hmm.
Fun guest.
How do you like the succinct objective, Will?
Succinct. I'm gonna have to do like a deep dive on the different uses of succinct, because I interpret that a little bit differently. You're fired up today. You're fired up. You're fired up yesterday too.
I didn't open up WordPress. Okay, like I said, that's the line I got to keep explaining to people, I guess, which is that when I'm having fun, I'm having fun. When it's about my professional opinion, that's a little different.
Yeah, fair enough. I totally understand what you're saying. We will not name any names with that. All right. If you haven't, please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ Guerra, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.